You ever get that feeling when you arrive somewhere new and everything looks fine, but you feel something tightening under your skin anyway? That was Hemwick the moment I stepped off the shuttle. It wasn't anything visual. The sky was bright, ice blue, the kind of crisp winter morning I'd usually find refreshing. The village was quaint, wood-shingled cottages, a stone chapel, a single winding road that looped around a frozen lake and disappeared into the trees. No signs of decay or poverty. The people didn't even look particularly strange. Just quiet. Still. Too still. I'd come to document a regional legend I first heard about while interviewing a folklorist in Montreal 3 months earlier. She'd mentioned it casually, off the record, while flipping through notes from a dead professor's library. A name scribbled in the margins of an old anthropology text. Stillwood. And next to it, "Don't laugh back." At the time, I dismissed it as academic superstition, but something about the phrasing lodged in me like a sliver under my nail. A laugh? In a forest? I'd spent years documenting strange cultural tales and dying myths across small-town Canada, but something in that phrase felt personal, as if it wasn't describing a metaphor or warning, as if it was describing an event. I found only one location on the map that matched. Hemwick, a village bordered by an old-growth forest known locally as Stillwood. No official record of that name in any census or wildlife registry. Just whispers online and a few archived newspaper clippings in the McGill folklore collection. In all of them, the same phrase appeared like an echo. The laugh heard in the silent woods. I booked a cabin for the month. The landlord, a woman named Mrs. Gellert, met me at the bus drop-off. She didn't shake my hand, just nodded once, like she knew who I was before I spoke. Her eyes were so pale they looked cloudy. She barely spoke the whole ride to the cabin. When I asked about the forest, she said only, "Don't go past the fence." Not even in daylight. There was a fence? Turns out, yes. An old wooden barrier about chest height, running the full length of the tree line, like a property border. No signs, no locks, just wood worn gray by snow and time. It was the only thing separating the last row of homes from the endless curtain of pine. I asked her if it was meant to keep animals out. "No," she said. "It's to keep what's inside from coming here." I laughed. Not a full laugh, more like a reflex. She didn't. The cabin itself was cozy. Rustic wood interior, wood-burning stove, twin bed with quilts that smelled like cedar and old books. She'd left a kettle on the stove and a note pinned to the fridge. "Don't answer if you hear knocking, no matter what time it is." I assumed she meant for visitors. Delivery people. Kids playing pranks. Still, I reread the note 3 times. It didn't specify what kind of knocking. The first night was quiet. Too quiet. I slept poorly, not from noise, but from lack of it. No car engines. No wind. No owls. Not even the soft groan of trees swaying in the cold. Just a blanket of silence, so deep I could hear my own pulse in my ears. And that's when I started to think, maybe that was the first sign. Because something about Hemwick doesn't want to be heard. I woke up to frost on the inside of the window. My breath came in foggy clouds, even though the stove was still warm. I brought my field mic, notebook, and Canon DSLR, planning to do a walking interview series with locals and gather environmental sound from the woods. Thought I'd start easy. The first person I spoke to was the village librarian. His name was Otto. Wrinkled, slow-moving, probably in his 80s. He wore a red scarf tied too tight around his neck and smelled of wood polish and tobacco. When I asked about Stillwood, he squinted at me like I'd mispronounced it. No such place. I pointed at the window where the edge of the forest could be seen just past the chapel. That forest, I said. He looked, swallowed, then turned back. We don't name it. I pressed, asked about the laughter stories. He refused to say the word, but he did offer me a book. Handwritten, no title, bound in old leather with the corners flaking. I'm not saying it's true, he said, but this came from my father, and his from his. Inside were hand-drawn maps, trees with symbols etched into the trunks, markers labeled with dates, notes written in a scrawled, panicked hand. One page caught my eye immediately. The first time you hear it, it sounds human. The second time, it sounds like you. The third time, it find where you sleep. The fourth time was crossed out, scribbled over until the paper had torn. I looked up. Otto was watching me. His mouth moved like he wanted to speak, but no sound came. Finally, he just pointed at my coat pocket. I pulled out my phone. No bars. No recordings in town, he said. The forest hears those, and it doesn't like to be heard. I don't know what drove me back to the woods the next day. Sleep had been impossible. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw the crooked silhouette of the figure that laughed, heard its ragged breath, the echo of laughter that didn't fade like normal sound should. I kept telling myself it was just some disturbed camper, some prank pulled too far. But something deeper, something primal, scratched at the back of my mind. Fear, yes, but not of a person. Fear of something ancient, unseen, and wrong. I woke just before dawn, drenched in sweat. My phone showed 4:12 a.m., the same time I had heard the laugh the night before. That number stuck in my head like a hook, like it meant something. My alarm wasn't set. I hadn't moved. I just opened my eyes, and that time was staring back at me. The woods had been silent then, too. Even now, I could swear I heard nothing outside. No birds, no wind. Just a dead sort of quiet that filled every corner of my house and made the darkness feel suffocating. I couldn't shake it. I needed to go back. Against every survival instinct, I dressed, grabbed my flashlight, and drove back out to the trailhead. I didn't tell anyone. What would I even say? The sky was just beginning to glow with a dull gray light as I reached the edge of the woods. I stood there for a long moment, listening. Still no birds. No rustling leaves. Just the crunch of my boots on dry pine needles as I stepped past the trail marker. The deeper I went, the more I felt watched. I kept my phone out, the flashlight app on, though the rising light made it mostly unnecessary. I wasn't following the official trail. I'd memorized my steps from the night before. I remembered the split log, the broken tree branch, the hollow stump that looked like a twisted mouth. Everything still sat in the same uncanny positions. It was like the woods hadn't changed, hadn't lived at all since I last saw them. I stopped at the exact spot where the laugh had come from. There was no sign of anyone. No footprints. No leftover campfire or discarded beer, cans like you might expect from some local teens. But there was something else. Carved into the bark of a tree, just ahead of me, was a small spiral. It wasn't fresh, but it hadn't been there the day before. I would have noticed. It was too deliberate, too. Unsettling. About the size of a dinner plate and carved so deep that dried sap had hardened around the edges of the grooves. I reached out without thinking, brushing my fingers against it. The instant I did, I heard again the laugh. But it wasn't coming from ahead of me. It was behind me. I spun, flashlight beam flailing wildly through the underbrush, catching nothing. The laugh didn't continue. Just a single burst, brief and breathy, like it had been holding itself in. My heart pounded so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I wanted to run, but something compelled me to stay. I took out my phone, opened the camera, and began recording. I narrated quietly, trying to calm myself with the sound of my own voice. This is the same place. Spiral on the tree, laughter again, same time of day. As I filmed, the wind picked up out of nowhere. No warning, just a single gust that bent the branches above me and knocked my phone from my hand. I dove to grab it and paused. There was something on the screen. The camera was still recording, aimed upward, and standing between the trees, barely visible at the edge of the frame, was a figure. Tall, thin. It wasn't facing the camera. It was facing me. I whipped around. There was nothing there. I checked the video again, rewound, frame by frame. The shape was unmistakable, human-like, but just wrong enough. The arms were too long. The head sat too low on the neck. Its face was either obscured or simply missing. I wanted to scream, but my throat was dry. The wind had stopped. I heard something soft fall behind me. Not a branch, not a pine cone. I turned slowly. It was a piece of cloth, old, frayed, and grayish-brown. It looked like it had once been part of a coat or a shirt, but now it was just a rag. It hadn't been there before. And worse, it was folded carefully. I picked it up. It was warm. I dropped it instantly and backed away, tripping over a root and nearly falling. I scanned the trees, waiting for movement, another sound, anything. But the woods were still again, and I felt suddenly, horribly alone. No, not alone. Watched. I turned to leave, retracing my steps, more by instinct than memory. As I passed the spiral again, I noticed something else. A second spiral, smaller, beneath the first. Not there before. Fresh. I didn't touch it. I ran. Back at my car. I found deep scratches along the driver's side door. They weren't there when I arrived. They weren't animal scratches. They were symbols, more spirals. Smaller. Deeper. When I got home, I locked everything. Every door, every window. I checked the attic, the basement. Nothing. But that night, I woke again at 4:12 a.m. And on my pillow, next to my head, was the piece of cloth. Still folded. Still warm. And from the woods outside, though my windows were shut tight, I swear I heard the laugh again. Closer this time. Lower. Right outside. I didn't scream. I wanted to. My lungs were frozen with the instinct to. But I didn't. I stared at the folded piece of cloth on my pillow like it had teeth. It hadn't been there when I went to sleep. I was sure of that. I hadn't brought it into the house. I'd left it in the woods. I'd run from it like it was poison. But here it was, warm again as though it had just been tucked there. Gently, by something that didn't want to wake me. My ears strained for the laugh I thought I heard outside. But there was only silence now. That cold, sickening kind of silence where sound feels like it's been buried, not merely absent. I sat up slowly. I didn't touch the cloth. I just watched it. The only light in the room came from the street lamp filtering through my blinds. My bedroom felt smaller than usual, like the walls had moved in closer. I felt dizzy and something worse, the distinct sensation that I had been watched while I slept. For how long? I didn't want to know. I stood, careful not to disturb the cloth, and backed toward the door. My phone lay on a nightstand. I picked it up, heart racing, and opened the camera app. I aimed it at the cloth. Nothing strange. I turned it to face myself and froze. Behind me, barely visible in the mirror over my dresser, was a figure. Black, blurry, but tall and hunched, its outline warped like heat shimmer in the air. It was standing directly in the corner of my room. I spun, lifting the phone's flashlight, but there was nothing there. I turned back. The mirror was empty. The cloth was gone. I swear it had vanished while I looked away for less than a second. That was the first night I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house across town. I didn't tell them everything. Just said I hadn't been feeling safe in my neighborhood. They welcomed me like they always did, no questions asked. But even there, even away from the woods, I didn't feel right. I started noticing things, little things. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the mirrors that wasn't mine. Sometimes, if I was in a room alone, I'd hear whispering just on the edge of hearing, too faint to understand, but with a distinct tone. Almost playful, but cruel. At night, I heard footsteps on the carpet outside my door. Always at 4:12 a.m. Never more, never less. And I never saw anyone. Once, I opened the door the instant I heard the creak, only to find the hallway empty. No windows were open. Nothing had moved, except, of course, that one night when I found my shoes turned backwards. The laces tied together. Not like a prank, more like a warning. On the fifth night, I had a dream. I was back in the woods, only the trees were taller, darker, more closely packed. The sky was red, not the color of sunset, but blood mixed with soot. I walked forward and heard my own voice calling me deeper. Not echoing, speaking. A second voice, identical to mine, whispering from ahead. Come see, it said. It wants you to know. I woke with my nails dug into my palm, so deeply they drew blood. My parents noticed I wasn't sleeping. My mother asked if I was using anything. My father asked if I'd seen a doctor. I lied to both of them. How could I explain that something I didn't understand, something possibly not human, had followed me from the woods? That it was still here, that it never blinked. It only watched. On the seventh day, I went to a local library. I searched for anything I could find about the forest, Old Pine Hollow, it was called. I found old newspaper archives, town records, historical maps. One name kept appearing over and over again, always in connection with strange disappearances, strange sightings, strange symbols. The Spiral Watcher. Most of the articles were buried in local lore. Back in 1940s, hikers began reporting strange occurrences in Old Pine Hollow. Some said they saw a man tall, clothed in rags, always facing away. Others said they heard a laugh at night, or saw spirals carve into trees that bled when touched. One journal entry, handwritten in a microfiche scan from 1952, caught my attention. I seen it again tonight. It's not a man. It's like a hole in the woods where light don't go. I seen it lean out from behind a tree. No eyes, just shape. I heard it laugh, but it wasn't happy. It laughed like it knew I couldn't leave. It waits. It watches. And when it touches you, you're marked. That word hit me like a punch. Marked. The spirals. The cloth. The scratches on my car. The dream. Had I been marked? That night, I drove back to the woods. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I needed to see it again. Not just to understand, but to prove I wasn't insane. To prove I hadn't made all this up in my unraveling brain. It was 4:03 a.m. when I arrived. The woods greeted me with that same oppressive silence. I didn't bring a flashlight this time. I let the moon guide me. My steps were slow, deliberate. I knew the way by heart now, like I'd walked it in every dream since the first night. When I reached the carved spiral, there were 3 more beneath it now, each smaller, each darker. I didn't touch them. I whispered aloud, "What are you?" And from behind the nearest tree, I heard the laugh. Low, long delighted, not at me, but because of me. And then something stepped out into the path. It wasn't quite human, and it didn't stop smiling. It was tall. That was my first impression that it wasn't just human height. It loomed, and yet it moved like it weighed nothing at all, like it was made of silk and smoke and memory. Its smile never changed. Too wide, too perfect, like it had studied how people smiled and overdid it just enough to seem wrong. It didn't have eyes, not in the traditional sense. Where eyes should have been, there were twin pits of light, not white, not glowing, but like holes punched into the world. Looking at them felt like staring through the surface of still lake and seeing something looking back. I couldn't move, not in fear, but in certainty. Something deep in my spine said don't run. Not because it would chase me, but because running would make it happy. And I didn't want to know what happened when it was truly pleased. It tilted its head at me, slowly, with a twitch in its joints like a stop-motion puppet with missing frames. The sound of its neck cracking echoed like branches snapping under snow. And then it spoke. Back again. Its voice didn't come from its mouth. The smile never moved. The sound came from behind me, beside me, inside me. Like my own thoughts had been hijacked by something ancient and gleeful. You brought yourself. That's rare. I tried to step back, but the forest wouldn't let me. The trees behind me now curved in a semicircle, blocking the way. I swear they hadn't been there a second ago. Do you want to know what's funny? It asked, though its tone didn't change. Always that flat, too loud whisper. You were chosen long before you heard me, before you ever came here. They all are. They? I choked out. It stepped closer. I didn't see it move. It was just closer suddenly. I could see the surface of it now. Not skin, not fabric, but something that pulsed with patterns. Spirals, dozens of them, etching and re-etching into its surface like a rotating puzzle. All who laugh. And then I did hear it, the laugh again. Only this time, it wasn't one voice. It was many. Hundreds. Thousands. Echoing through the trees like a crowd of ghosts watching a play they'd seen 100 times before. They weren't laughing at a joke. They were laughing in anticipation. And that's when I realized they were laughing for it. It had an audience. And I was the punchline. The thing extended a hand. Its fingers weren't right. Too many knuckles. Each joint bent both ways. And at the tips were tiny slits like mouths, breathing softly. Touch me, it said. You've earned it. I shook my head. Its smile widened. Bones cracked with the stretch. You already did, it whispered. I woke up screaming. Only I wasn't in bed. I was in the woods, covered in leaves, pine needles, mud. My clothes were soaked. My hands were scratched raw. My phone was still in my pocket dead. The sun was rising. Pale orange light filtered through the trees. I stumbled out, half delirious, and drove back to my parents' house with shaking hands. I didn't speak for a day. I couldn't explain what had happened because there wasn't a clean explanation. How could I tell someone I'd spoken with a thing that wore a smile like a trophy and laughed with the voices of everyone who'd gone missing? I started searching again, going deeper into the history, digging into forums, contacting locals who'd posted about strange events in the Hollow. And I started finding stories, all eerily similar. People who'd wandered off trails and come back different. People who heard laughter in places where sound shouldn't carry. A man in 1976 who showed up at a gas station covered in spirals burned into his skin. A woman in 1984 who recorded 14 hours of laughter on cassette tape after one walk through the trees and went missing 2 weeks later. And then one post on a deep forum page. It doesn't kill you. Not at first. It waits. It makes you feel yourself disappear. You don't go missing. You fade. That's the joke. That's the laugh. You vanish piece by piece until even you forget your name. I began seeing signs of it everywhere. In my mirror, quick flashes of a smile behind me. In my dreams, spirals in the sky, and a forest that reached across dimensions. In my house, objects moved slightly, and once I found my mouth guard twisted into a spiral. The thing had touched me. It had marked me, and now it was waiting, laughing. I heard it in the quietest places, behind static, in fan hums, beneath the whisper of my own breath. It had said they were all chosen, that they'd laugh once too. Had I? Had I laughed the first time I heard it? Had that been the mistake? Now I don't sleep. Not really, because in my dreams, it stands just beyond the trees, smiling. And when it comes, it won't come as a monster. It will come as a joke so cruel, so perfect that I'll laugh too. And that will be the end of me. I haven't slept in 3 days. The laughter doesn't come only from the woods anymore. It's in my house, in my walls, in the silence between my own breaths. After what happened that night near the tree line, after I saw the thing that wore my brother's face but laughed with a voice that belonged to something else entirely, I tried to tell myself it was grief, madness. But every explanation I clung to crumbled when I found the mark. It was on my bedroom wall, faint at first. A handprint, long fingers stretched too wide with no thumb, as though something had pressed itself from the inside out. I tried to scrub it off, paint over it. It came back the next morning, darker. Veta. I took photos, sent them to friends. No one could see it in the images. It only existed for me, just like the laugh. The woods behind our house were sealed off decades ago. Officially, it was for environmental preservation. But my grandmother always told me stories I laughed at when I was younger. Tales about a man who went into the woods after his dog and came out with someone else's eyes. About a girl who heard a voice calling her name from the trees and returned weeks later, barefoot and smiling, with her mouth sewn shut from the inside. About a priest who tried to bless the land and vomited up pine needles until he bled out. I thought they were all stories meant to scare me away. Now I think they were warnings. And I didn't listen. That morning, I tried to leave. I packed a duffel bag with clothes, my laptop, and the last photo I ever took of Liam before he disappeared. The real Liam, not the thing that came back. I threw the bag into my truck and didn't bother locking the front door. I didn't think I'd ever come back. But as I reversed down the gravel driveway, the world bent. I mean that literally. The trees on either side of the road grew taller. The sky turned from gray to almost white. My radio, which hadn't worked in years, hissed to life with a single note. A laugh. Soft at first, like a child's giggle. Then the truck died. No engine sputter. No warning light. Just silence. Except for the laughing. I stepped out, heart pounding. My breath formed no fog in the air. The wind didn't move, and every tree I looked at seemed to lean closer. The road I'd driven down 100 times had changed. It curved now, subtly at first, then sharply, as though it had spiraled in on itself when I wasn't looking. I turned around. The house was closer than it should have been. I hadn't moved at all. That's when I knew. I wasn't leaving. Not until it wanted me to. That night, I stayed in the basement. I don't know why. Maybe because it was the one place the laughter hadn't touched. Maybe because I needed to feel enclosed. Sheltered. I turned off every light. Sat on the floor. Closed my eyes. And it still found me. Not through sound this time, but through sensation. Like breath against my ear. A weight pressing the air down. A finger, just one, sliding across the back of my neck, too slow to be accidental. I stood up and screamed. No one answered. That's when I heard the door at the top of the basement stairs creak open. But no one came down. The house was waiting. So I went up. The living room was dark, but not empty. There were footprints in the dust. Fresh. Bare. Leading to the hallway where Liam's room used to be. I followed them. They stopped at his door. The door was ajar. Inside, the window was open, and something was standing in the corner. It didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, head cocked, watching. I said his name, Liam, and it smiled, not with lips or teeth, but with the idea of a smile, like it was letting me know it knew what I wanted, what I feared. It raised its hand and pointed to the window, and then it spoke for the first time. You left him here. Its voice was wrong, hollow, as if it was reading the words from somewhere else. You buried the wrong one. I don't remember climbing through the window. Don't remember running into the woods barefoot, the branches slicing my legs, the laughter following me like smoke. I ran until I couldn't anymore, and when I stopped, the forest was different. Quieter. Dead. The trees didn't sway. The leaves didn't rustle. The air didn't breathe. And in the clearing ahead, there was a shape. A figure. Kneeling in the dirt. Digging. I approached slowly. It was me. Not someone who looked like Mimi. Same torn shirt. Same bloody hands. Same breathless terror in his eyes. He looked up at me, and he whispered, "Help me dig it up." The ground opened without tools, soft like wet sand, and what we pulled from it was a third version of me, eyes open, mouth sewn shut, still warm, still smiling. I woke up in my bed. The sunlight was wrong, still and cold. The clock blinked 3:33 a.m. The window was closed, but there was dirt on my hands, and something laughed quietly from the hallway. The dirt on my hands hadn't come from the dream. It was real, real in a way that made my pulse thunder in my ears and my breath catch in my throat. I tried to tell myself I was still caught in the aftermath of the nightmare, but I could feel the weight of the dirt, cold and gritty between my fingers, as if it had been freshly dug. The house was quiet now, but the silence had taken on a new meaning. It was oppressive, thick. The laughter, the source of my nightmares, was gone for the moment, but I knew better than to believe it had left for good. The walls of the house felt alive now, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all watching me. The room spun as I stood up and stumbled to the door. I knew I shouldn't go downstairs. I knew I shouldn't even move, but my feet carried me down the stairs as if they had a mind of their own. I passed the living room, where the dark shadows twisted in corners, and then I reached the hallway. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the door to Liam's room standing ajar, just like it had been when I last saw it. I paused at the doorway. The silence here was unnatural, like the air had thickened, as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. I stepped into the room, feeling the weight of my own breath. The window was open again. A sharp, cold wind rushed in, carrying the scent of the forest. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. Liam. Not Liam, but the thing that had once been him. It was kneeling by the window, staring out as though it was waiting for me. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, and it turned its head slowly, in a motion that made my skin crawl. Its face was pale, too pale, hollow with dark, sunken eyes. A twisted version of Liam's face, too distorted to be human. And then, as if mocking my fear, it smiled. That horrible, familiar smile. "I told you," it said, its voice low and hollow. "You left him here. You left me here. I didn't know what to do." Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, but my feet felt frozen, bound to the floor by an unseen force. The thing that wore my brother's face stood up slowly, almost gracefully. Its body was too long, too stretched, like something had been wrong with it from the start. It reached out a hand, fingers too long and too thin, and gestured for me to come closer. "You shouldn't have come back," it said softly, almost sweetly. "You can't leave now, not when you found us." And then it stepped aside. Behind it, in the corner of the room, was a hole. A deep, gaping hole in the floor, as if someone had dug into the earth itself. There was no light down there, just a suffocating blackness that seemed to swallow everything it touched. I didn't want to look, but I did, and what I saw made my heart stop. A third version of me. It was lying in the hole. Its skin was pale, covered in dirt, its mouth sewn shut, just like the figure I had seen in the woods. Its eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling, and it was smiling, its lips stitched shut in an impossible grin. The thing that wore Liam's face stepped closer, its hand still extended. "Come on," it whispered. "You've been here before. You know what happens next." Tears filled my eyes, but I couldn't move. My legs refused to obey. The sound of my own pulse in my ears drowned out everything else. The laughter, the whispering wind, the ticking of the clock. I was paralyzed by fear, knowing that no matter what I did, I wouldn't escape. This was it. This was the end. The laughter began again. A soft chuckle at first, then louder, more forceful, until it felt like the walls themselves were shaking with it. It wasn't just one voice this time. It was many, different voices overlapping, some familiar, some strange, but they all shared the same unsettling tone. They echoed in my mind, in my bones, in my very soul. I was standing on the edge of the abyss now. My mind, strained beyond its limits, struggled to comprehend the truth. There was no escape. The house, the woods, the laugh. They were all part of something ancient, something that had always been here. I was never meant to leave. I was never meant to be free. The thing that wore Liam's face smiled wider, its mouth stretching unnaturally. "It's your turn now," it whispered. "You'll stay here with us." And then, before I could scream, before I could react, everything went black. When I woke, I was outside, but not in the way I thought. The ground beneath me was cold, wet. The trees towered above me, their branches twisting like gnarled hands reaching out for me. I was back in the woods. And the laughter? It was louder now, clearer, surrounding me. I turned in every direction, but I couldn't find the source. It was as if the sound was coming from everywhere. Inside me, inside my head. The wind whispered through the trees, but it wasn't the wind. It was the voices. They were all around me, filling the air, suffocating me. And then I realized it. I was not alone. I never was. The thing that wore my brother's face was watching me from the tree line. It smiled, that same wide, grotesque smile. And as I stumbled backward, I heard a voice behind me. "You never should have come here," it said. "We were waiting." I turned, and there, Standing just behind me was my own reflection, smiling, grinning, my face but wrong. And then I heard the laugh again, louder, closer, and it was mine.